parse once, execute many times. Critical to that is use of bind variables. Bind variables. I hope as developers you're all familiar with the context of bind variables. But just to be certain and make sure, because we are a large group, and make sure we are all on the same page of the manual there, I'll just quickly go through how these things would actually work. For example, I've just run that statement. Select star from emp where emp no equals 7369. That was parse, no bind, then execute fetch. No execute in this case because there's no DML involved. Most of the work will have been in fetch, but let's take a different example. Say I run look for a different employee number. That will have been a separate parse because it's a different statement. Whereas if I use bind variables, create a variable var v1 number, execute colon v1 equals, and put that through as 7369. Then select star from emp where emp no equals colon v1. Back comes Mr. Smith. Then I can set my bind variable to say 7788. Run the statement. Back comes Scott. Set the variable to 7902. Run the statement. That's the use of bind variables. And what is actually happening within the SGA? A view you're going to become very familiar with is the view $SQL. $SQL includes one row for each cursor currently cached in the library cache of the shared pool. The term cursor is very important, and we talk about cursors right through this course. For now, think of a cursor as just being a SQL statement. So think of it as it's more complex than this, but for now think of it as SQL has one row for every parse statement that's cached. You get the text of the statement, and then all sorts of useful information about that statement. So what I'm going to do is run a simple query against the library cache of the shared pool. So select SQL text executions in SQL, where SQL text like select star from emp. So I'm going to pick up all the statements I've been running, and for those statements, how many times have each been executed? And there you see that statement was executed once. That was executed once. That statement has been executed 3 times. It's that basic, the use of bind variables, because at each execution, that statement was identical. Even though the bind variable had a different value, it was only one parse. So one parse of the statement, or hard parse, I should say. Sorry, 3 soft parses. 1 hard parse, 3 executions. Bind variables, their use is critical. However, it's not that simple, because what if different binds or on different execution plans? Let us say we have a query on the lines of select all the cars where the color is black. Well, if I'm Henry Ford, they were all black, weren't they? So if I have a table of cars, select my cars where color is black, full table scan, because we want to retrieve virtually every car. Select from cars where color equals red. Well, Henry Ford only made 1 red car in his life. So if there's an index on color, that will be much better to use the index. So depending on the value of the bind variable, maybe you need different execution plans. This complicates the tuning process enormously, but there's nothing wrong with complexity.
John, let me contribute. I'd like to ask everybody a question. What about PL SQL variables? Do students use PL SQL? John's talking about bind variables. And we're finding out that bind variables are absolutely critical to the database performance and the SQL statement performance. There are complexities, as he mentioned, because you may put different values inside the variable, and thus different execution plans might be warranted. But what about PL SQL variables? Go ahead, John.
Oh, while people are thinking of PL SQL, remember in this case, my predicate is an equality predicate on a primary key. How many rows can any of these queries return? Do I have the problem that color equals red returns 1 row and color equals black returns 1,000,000 rows?
Primary key, equality predicate on primary key, folks. How many rows can come back? Please use your chat. Please use your chat. There's 19 people. Nobody's answering. Thank you, Grace. Thank you, Jess. Yes, John's
Good. Thank you.
Right. It's a querying primary key. Only 1 row can come back. That's 2 of 19. Next time we'd like to see more contributions when we ask a question. So, PL SQL, I hope you're wondering, how many of you use PL SQL? Just type in yes, yes. Type in yes. Let me see what you got. Come on. Talk to me. Beautiful. Oh, that's wonderful. Wonderful. So
you can raise your hands as well, people, by the way. There's a button to raise hands. Oh, thank you, Grace. I see you've raised your hand.
Very good. Oops. I forgot to look for that raised hand. Sorry about that, folks.
Yeah, use of PL SQL is critical in many ways for performance. It helps a lot in making sure that code is reusable.
And PL SQL variables are indeed bind variables. Grace, do you have a question? I'm sorry. Do you want me to unmute you or lower your hand to Grace? Grace, no. Okay, I'm going to lower your hand then, Grace.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's move on then. So parse, then bind. Though the order may change, and there's some complexities in there.